Hello, and welcome to Valley Veterans. We are fortunate to have Jack Mecham back with us to discuss an incredible time of our country's history in Southeast Asia particularly. And it's welcoming Jack back again, which is my pleasure. Let me share a little bit with our audience who Jack is. Jack has logged more than 3,000 hours in B-25s. During his career in the U.S. Air Force, he flew more than 20 different types of military aircraft, including cargo, passenger, fighter, rotary, wing, bomber, utility, and reconnaissance. He logged more than 12,100 flying hours during his 20 career. Jack earned his BSME and completed his master's coursework at Texas Tech under the AFIT program. Let me mention that we are not only honored to have him on Valley Veterans, but he presented what you're going to see at the Miami Valley Veterans Museum earlier this year. And we encourage you to take a good visit out there to the museum if you haven't been there before. Check that out. You'll be surprised at the broad coverage of the history of our military at the museum. In '66 to 1967, Jack planned and flew heavy helicopter missions in support of CIA operations in Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, and North Vietnam. Upon retirement from the U.S. Air Force in 1974, Jack entered the aerospace business where he managed 3 aerospace firms, including the aerospace division of Chrysler, based in Dayton. Retired from the aerospace business in 1996, he now teaches golf professionally, a job he thoroughly enjoys. And one of his claim to fame is he at one time played golf with Lou M., one of our celebrities here in the Miami Valley. Again, welcome, Jack, and we'll turn it over to you to pick up where you left off.
All right. Thank you. Previously, I had talked about the types of missions we flew, and I'd like to continue now defining the fighter escort that we used. First of all, we always went in pairs so we would have a backup on the helicopters. And we would use 2 fighters as escort. Normally, they would be A-1Es, which were excellent because they flew at the speeds we did. They could stay right there with us, roll in when necessary. On one occasion, I had T-28 from Air America that I used as escort. In emergency exfiltrations, a lot of times the A-1s would be spoken for, so we would have to use the fast fighters, and that just didn't work out well at all. They were too fast, and they didn't have enough fuel to stay with us, so in most cases we would just have to let them go home. We carried onboard weapons as required. Sometimes we had a 50 caliber in the door. We had a portable grenade launcher on board. And then other than that, we had our own personal weapons. And strike authority, over in Laos, if you wanted to strike a target along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, you had to get prior approval from Ambassador Sullivan on a case-by-case basis. We were the only organization, the 20th Helicopter Squadron there, that had blanket authority to direct strikes against targets of opportunity on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So when the A-1s would come back from missions, if they hadn't expended their munitions, they knew they were going to have some fun along the Ho Chi Minh Trail because we would turn them loose. Here I'd like to talk about the mission examples that I flew. And I'll use the map here as reference. The first mission was the evacuation of a village in Laos that was under siege. It was located in this general area here. And we went in there. We were designed to carry 35 combat-ready troops or 2 jeeps inside. I told the crew chief to let 35 of them on board because they would bring their personal possessions with them, whatever they could carry. Well, the next thing I looked back and the whole back end was full of people standing up. And I told the crew chief to close the door, or the ramp, and so they wouldn't fall out. and I had to hop out across the dry rice paddies to get translational lift because we were so heavy. Once we got back to the base and offloaded, in addition to the crew of 3, we had 78 of them on board. So we had 81 of us on board plus their possessions. Infiltration on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, we were going into the southern region of the Ho Chi Minh Trail and to put a team in, and this case it was just 2. And I looked at the landing zone photos in 3 dimensions, and it just didn't look large enough to me for us to be able to get into that landing zone. We got out there, and sure enough, it wasn't large enough. So I looked over in the near distance, and I could see the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and there was no activity on the trail. So I elected to land on the trail, and we're only there a couple of seconds to let the 2 people off. And once they were off, I turned around to take off, and coming around a bend in the trail was a road repair team. Now, these road repair teams would be about 300 men with shovels, and that's how they would repair bomb craters. They would dig dirt and throw it in there, and I wasn't worried about them, but they have guards with them on their perimeter. And I knew that if I tried to lift into a hover or turn around to get out of there, they were going to start firing at me. So I pulled in full power and headed straight at them. And I was doing almost 200, about 2 feet off the ground when I got to them. And of course, the road repair team, they were bailing out to the side to get out of the way. And in the process, they overran the guards. So they rendered them useless, and we didn't take a single hit coming out of there. Emergency exfiltration in southern Laos. We were going into southern Laos, and we rendezvoused with the fighters, which were jets in this case. They had us in view. We could see them at the border of Laos, and we started our movement to the east, and I told them in 10 minutes we were going to turn south in Laos. And about a minute before we turned, I asked them if they had us in sight, and they said, yes, you're down there by that river. Well, there wasn't any river, so I asked them, where are you? Well, they were in the middle of South Vietnam, and we were in the middle of Laos. Oh my. And they were getting low on fuel, so I said, go home. We turned south and headed into the region where the team was running, down here in the southern area. And we spotted the team. The enemy was chasing them. The other helicopter went to find a landing zone where we could pick them up. And in the meantime, we flew between the enemy and the team, and the co-pilot and the crew chief sat in the door and fired at the enemy to slow them down so that we could get a little more distance in there. Once the team was in the landing zone, the other helicopter developed some mechanical problems, so I had to go in and pull them out. And in the process of coming out of there, I had to chop my way through trees. And the one that I took out was about 8 inches in diameter, and it did no damage to the blades. Airlift of a CH-3 in Laos. We were going into the Bolivian Plateau, which is located down in this area, and it was shrouded by clouds. So we had to go around to the east and come back in. In the process of coming back in, we're going over enemy territory. Now, it's not heavily populated by the enemy, but it is controlled by them. And the other helicopter developed an overtemp on the transmission. Well, you have to get it on the ground in a hurry because it'll seize up that transmission. So there was a grass strip, and I told him to put it down there. I would be right behind him to grab anything relative to the mission and get out of there immediately and get on board. And as we were leaving, the enemy was moving in. It was only about a 5-minute flight to the base there at the Bolivian Plateau. And when we got there, luckily 2 of our aircraft were there prior to a mission. So I commandeered them. We loaded all 3 of our aircraft with native troops, and we went back to that landing zone. And the troops ran the enemy off, and in the meantime, the crew chiefs took the blades off of that helicopter that was down, put them on one of the other helicopters, and I actually slung that helicopter to get it back to the Bolivian Plateau. The manufacturer said that wasn't possible. I didn't lift it into a hover. What I did was roll it until I got it into translational lift, and then I could carry it. And I only had about a 5-minute flight. But in that process, we saved the aircraft, so we could use it for missions.
Jack, what sort of weight are we talking about there?
Over 9,000 pounds.
9,000 pounds.
Yeah.
Several tons.
Yeah. And emergency exfiltration in the Mecham Pass. The Mecham Pass was the primary area where the enemy would come into the Ho Chi Minh Trail from North Vietnam. And one of the teams that had been in there was on the run, and that pass is in the Box Canyon coming out to the west. And so we had to go in over the canyon. You can't go in at the Mecham Pass because they had a 100-millimeter radar-controlled gun there. So we had to go over the edge of the canyon and down in. In this case, we had T-28s for escort. And when we got up there, the entire canyon was shrouded in clouds, so the T-28s had to go home. Just like when you're in a fog, you can see a certain distance ahead. So we would drive up to the edge of the canyon, climb up through the clouds, keeping that edge in sight until we got to the top. And then once at the top, we would turn around, the crew chief would lay on the ramp in the back, and we would back down the other side, and he would make sure that nothing was coming up behind us. Once we got below the clouds, we started looking for the team. We found them, but there was no place to land to pick them up. And that gun, every once in a while, we get maybe a little bit close and I'd see it come around toward us. So we'd have to back off a little. And we finally decided to use our penetrator, but we only had 100 feet of cable on that penetrator, and it wasn't enough to get to the ground. So what I had to do was get the helicopter itself between 2 trees and then chop my way down through the trees until the penetrator would reach them on the ground. And as I brought up the second crew, the other helicopter said, "I've got to get out of here. The clouds are down on me." And he headed up the blind canyon. Now, of course, he can't climb rapidly because that gun's going to get him. So he has to climb gradually going out to the west and hope that there's no solid clouds out there. And by the time I got the last ones on board, we were sitting in the clouds in the trees. So I had to come up out of the trees and then follow the same route that he did, getting out of there.
Jack, I have a question that occurs to me, partly from curiosity, partly from my time serving over in Vietnam. Your missions, obviously, in many cases, were retrieval, rescue, and so forth, dynamic operations. Did you ever encounter enemy aircraft? We often think about Russian MiGs.
No, not aircraft. Ground fire, yes, but not aircraft. And in fact, during the Black Mariah's tenure over there, not just during our operation, but for its entire tenure over there, it occurred 350 hits.
And you came away as safe and sound and all together as you are today.
Yes. In fact, we found ways to survive over there, even in the north, and I insisted we follow those. No hot dogging. And during the year I was in charge, we accomplished every mission. We didn't lose one man or one helicopter. So
fantastic.
We did take hits, but we didn't lose any.
Our production of our Valley veterans here has been extremely indebted to Ted Jones, who you've come to know as our editor and oftentimes producer. And there'll be a great number of things we get to chat about after this is all over. But I don't want to break up your story. I want you to be able to continue, but I did want to mention Ted as our producer, our editor.
Okay. And the last mission I'd like to bring out, we accomplished a mission in North Vietnam, and we had finished. We were on our way back. One of the F-105s got shot down. The wingman called rescue control and said he had a good shoot on him and wanted rescue to come up and get him. Well, rescue couldn't go north of Hanoi. Not that they couldn't do the job, but rescue control would hold them back sometimes for up to 2 hours. So it would become a hotbed, and it would be a suicide mission. So they were not allowed to go north of Hanoi. About 3 minutes after he announced that they had a good shoot on him, I saw his chute floating down. So I called the wingman. I said, I've got him in sight, I'll bring him in. And the rescue control said, who are you? And I said, if you don't recognize the call sign, you don't have a need to know. And of course that made them mad. And they said, well, you're not authorized to pick him up. I said, I don't need your authorization. In fact, I said, I'd appreciate it if you'd clear the air and let me work the problem. You can't leave someone behind when you can see them like that. And I stayed back over the jungle where the enemy couldn't see me or hear me. And once I saw where he was going to land, I popped into the field, and I was on the ground about 2 seconds before he was. He didn't hesitate to dive on board, and I proceeded. This was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I proceeded toward the tree line, and I was doing almost 200 by the time I got there, a couple feet off the ground. As I pulled up over the tree line, I could see a sheet of bullets. And it turned out the reason I could see them, they were quad ZPUs, so they're putting out 12,000 rounds a minute. And I made a turn to the right to avoid as much as possible, and we took over 60 hits. But no one on board got hit, but it did do significant damage to the helicopter. And I was able to limp back to one of our Lima sites that was in parallel to Hanoi, up there in Laos, where we left the aircraft to be repaired.
Jack, we've got about 9 minutes left here, just to let you know what you need to go further.
Well, I'm down to the end here.
Okay.
Now, the significance of the Black Mariah, as I mentioned before, the reason for it was being different. First of all, it and the other one that were in rescue to begin with over there, they were the crews of those two were the ones that coined the term Jolly Green Giant. The Black Mariah was painted black not because of night missions like a lot of people think, but because they ran out of camouflage paint. And once it got painted black and dubbed the Black Maria, no one would let them repaint it because it would no longer be the Black Maria. It had a reputation among the enemy. It had a price tag on its head of $50,000. And of course, that was significant because those people over there at that time, a common laborer was making the equivalent of about 20 cents an hour. So $50,000 would have meant a lot of money to them.
Certainly.
And then once it returned to the States, of course, no longer black, it was in rescue, and it happened to be TDY to Nellis when the MGM Grand burned in Las Vegas. And the Black Maria was the one that pulled them off the roof of the hotel. So it saved them. So it has quite a reputation. And,
Certainly does.
It now resides in the Air Force Museum here at Wright-Patterson. So anyone that visits the museum, it's the only black helicopter out there. It's been restored to the Vietnam configuration. And that ends my presentation.
Well, Jack, we're not done with you yet there. I mentioned your experience there with playing golf with Lou M., and also you enjoy coaching a girls' high school golf team.
Yes.
So give us a little more insight into Jack Mecham, the everyday civilian.
Well, I stay busy all the time. I'm 87 years old now, and I play golf quite a bit. My handicap in our golf league is 0. And I've had a number of rounds below par last year. I won the league 2 years in a row, and I enjoy coaching the girls. We've had some real accomplishments among them. The ones that came to us had never played golf, and some of them went away playing close to par. So, it was a lot of fun doing that.
Today, yeah.
We had a good relationship with not only them but their parents. We would get together with their parents, so it was more like a family thing. And the parents would come out to watch them play, and it was fun.
Now today, that we are taping this for the folks that are watching, it's 1 degree outside when we got up this morning, so a little too cold for golf. What do you do in this kind of winter weather?
Well, I have a lot of things at home I do, plus, because I've got 5 acres, plus I go out to the Air Force Museum from time to time and educate people, because there's a number of the different types of aircraft that I've flown that are in the museum. So, a lot of the people going to the museum, they don't understand what they're seeing. And it really enlightens them. And I enjoy doing that,
Well, I know from my experience of visiting it several times, I'm always enlightened and so forth, and there's something always new, or at least appears to be new. And I know recently they even had a special day of discovery. People could look in the cockpit of the SR-71. Yes. And I know that's only a brief part of your reflection and your experience, but what did the SR-71 mean to us as a combat country?
Well, of course, the SR-71 was so far ahead of its time. We had satellite coverage at the time, but it was sparse. And the enemy would do their activities outside the cycle of of those satellites. So we would then sneak in with the SR-71. And it was flying high enough and fast enough that the enemy fighters could not get up there, and the missiles were not fast enough to catch it. So you could sneak in and catch them doing their activities, and then get out of there. Now the 71s were all based out of Beale in Northern California, but there was a base in the Pacific and a base in England where they would fly TDY out of if they were flying missions in those areas.
Well, we are taping this program with Jack Mecham here, again with the skills of Ted Jones, our editor and producer, and Cheryl at the director's button up there. We are at the 26th of January, a very tenuous moment, and we don't know what exactly may happen. We thought we were all done with the term Cold War. We seem to be in another one. We have a couple minutes. Times are tense, aren't they?
Yes. Yes, they are. And I don't know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
None of us do, really.
That's true.
But
we all hope for the best all the
Yes.
way around there. But I know those of us that have served have a little bit more keen insight and concern and visual operation and so forth of those places over there. I want to mention that Jack is also a collector of some antique cars.
Yes.
Jack is a multi-dimensional individual, and we appreciate him sharing all of this with us today on Valley Veterans. Again, this is Valley Veterans. Our program is sponsored by the Miami Valley Veterans Museum, 2245 South Country County 25A in Troy, Ohio. We invite you to come out and visit. Our phone number and our address and so forth will be provided on the screen. The first Wednesday of every month, and Jack experienced this, we have a special coffee with the guests and so forth. We invite all to come and enjoy that. There's several activities, and please be free to visit our Facebook page, our website, and come on by and take a look at that museum. Jack, as we finish up here and so forth, is there any final salute to any group or anybody? Thank you very much, Jack. You've made us a very special day for us. This is the second of two programs with Jack Mecham. Be sure to look for both. Again, they're on local public access and on YouTube. Just type in there Miami Valley Veterans Museum. Thanks for joining us again for Valley Veterans. And thank you, Jack, for being a very special guest. Thank you very much.